Hey everybody, this is the Design System Field Guide number 3. Chris and I are very happy to see you again. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm great, man. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. Lots to talk about. How about you? You got big changes in your life. You should talk about big change in your life and in
Sure.
advance, congratulations.
Thanks. So I guess the main thing that start with is that I started a new job, and so I'm leading the design system team at Zapier now. So I'm pretty excited. It's like, you know, day 3, so I'm still drinking out of a fire hose kind of vibe, But yeah, so far so good. People are super nice. I'm just learning about the team, the processes, the tools that they use, and stuff like that. But yeah, so far so good. I'm excited, and hopefully I'll report back later on about that. The other thing on my end, well, I was on vacation, so that's always nice. I was vacationing in Maine on Haven Island,
Nice.
which was super nice. Um, and yeah, apart from that, I guess next month I'm actually going to be talking about design system again. Surprise, surprise! But at the Denver Startup Week, it's September 20th, and let me try to find that for you. So yeah, that's me. I wanted to do a talk about scaling because I feel like this is kind of like the crux of it for design systems.
I
But
love the
yeah,
title.
yeah, thanks. I still need to write it though, but and yeah, that's me. What about you? What's up with you?
I got a lot going on. We're doing a webinar with Dribble pretty soon about AI and design systems, which we can throw up a link to here in a minute. There's also the Design Systems in FinTech like mini summit conference over in New York in October.
Okay, I think
That's going on. That's going to be pretty exciting.
so. You posted something right on LinkedIn.
Yep. Posted. That's the type form where you can apply.
Okay,
Pretty excited at our speaker list for that. Like having Robin, who's the design systems lead at JP Morgan, and Richard, who's been deeply embedded in the world of design and design systems for a very long time. It's going to be great. We're going to talk a lot about like the strategic relevance of design systems, and we can jam on about that. Kind of with a group that's really industry focused. We're starting to kind of think about how we collect industry problems into groupings and work with very specific industries about like their particular design systems needs. Banking, fintech, finance tends to have a lot of needs about data, and so it's really interesting to talk about like data visualization and a bunch of the things there, independent from a context of like retail, where charts and graphs aren't really a part of their component library. And then, starting to organize some meetups, which are pretty exciting. We don't have a date yet, but I'm working on a meetup in Seattle. We also just had our Chicago meetup not that long ago. And so these are starting to like be interesting enough that I'm going to collect these into some sort of schedule or event grouping so that people can attend locally or help organize locally. And just as a throwing it out there sort of thing, Knapsack will help sponsor if you want to run a local meetup. And so it's just about like trying to figure out how to get it organized, get a space, et cetera, et cetera. We can't do all that in every single city, but we are happy to help out so we can keep building this community.
cool. That sounds very nice. By the way, just before we move on to this particular fintech event, what's the type form for?
Oh, it's to apply. So you
Okay.
can jump in, you can apply. It's pretty limited. It's actually really fun. My cousin is opening his new wine bar in near Chelsea Market, and we get to throw it in that space, which is really awesome. But it's very limited in terms of size.
Okay. So you're basically like the form is just to make sure that the people signing up are relevant for this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Right?
you throw something out on a live stream, you never know who's listening. You get some riffraff you got to keep out. No, just kidding. Like it is about though making sure that you are pretty industry focused. So if it's like, for example, if you work at an agency, it's probably not the event for you. But if you work at a bank or at a financial institution or even something like an insurance company might be relevant. those would all be great folks to have at that.
Cool. Great. And yes, we do have a Dribble link that Lindsay very nicely shared with us. Can you talk a little bit more about like what this is about?
Yeah, so we're hosting a talk about AI and design systems. The idea of it is it's Evan and I, my co-founder, talking about how really, like, when we think about the impact of AI and design systems, it's not just one AI or one system. It's going to be a collection of different AI systems working together to enhance the ability to deliver on design system value. And so that takes the form of things that help you index, understand, and navigate your own design system. It talks about things like how AI can help us aggregate data about the use of a design system. And it's also like the one that everybody's very excited about, the generative AI side, that lets you know like how you can actually create things in your design system.
Very cool. Okay. When is that again?
It's in the link. I don't remember the exact day off the top of my head, which is somewhat embarrassing.
Well, you have too much on your hand. That's the problem.
It's a lot going on.
Let me just try to find that.
You can add producer Lindsay to the chat, and I'm sure that she can talk about it.
I don't think she's on the chat though.
Oh, I see how it is.
Workshops / what's the Substack. Oops. How come I don't find it? Okay, well, I'll look for it later, and I'll share that in the comments. Okay, well, no, we don't need that. Okay, cool. Well, I'll share that later in the banners or something like that. Should we move on to our guests today? Because I feel like we have two awesome guests for this session.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first in line. Hey, Adam, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
We're
good
good.
to see you all today. Excited to be here.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
So, Adam, you and I have known each other like years and years at this point. And I think that one of the first design systems that I ever really built in a super fleshed out way was when you were over at Pegasystems. And we worked with a bunch of old friends around the Bolt design system. And it was just in the infancy of Basalt, the agency, which would later become Knapsack. And what was 2016, 2017 that we were doing work on that?
Yeah, it was, I think, 2016, 2017 into 2018. I think Bolt really got started in 2017 after we had a couple also ran design systems at the time, kind of like side of the desk projects. And at a certain point, it was like, we need to grow up and invest in this and spend some quality time and dedicated effort and do the deep dive and build resilient components. And yeah, y'all were instrumental in supporting us and getting that out the door and getting, just putting the thing on rockets and taking off quickly. Like we were able to get to a V1.0 in like 6 months or something like that. It was awesome. And the case studies coming out of it were just phenomenal. And I know that group is still, benefiting from a lot of that work, and they're still producing quickly and jamming on it. So super excited to see them keep going.
So you took that and then you decided that I've had enough of Boston, I'm moving west. And so you're in Seattle now, speaking to the Seattle meetup.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what you do now.
Yeah. So I'm over at a small company called Amazon. Been there as of next week, it'll be about 5 years. So yeah, it's been quite a trip. I'm on my second design system team there. I worked on one of the HR systems, and then I'm on Meridian, which is an operations design system. There's a couple others. There's always shopping, which everybody's familiar with. There's the AWS one, which is Cloudscape, which is publicly available. And then we're Meridian, and we're kind of like the more generic design system in the company. So I've been on this team for 3 years as a designer, managed a to kind of like do it all wherever I'm needed. What's been awesome about this opportunity is that there's very much a 1 to 100 story instead of the 0 to 1 story that we were talking about. Like when we started both at Pegasystems, that's very much like, let's get this thing off the ground. When I joined this team, all the components were there, and from there it was just like, how do we just create velocity for our customers?
So is Christoph right? Does scale ruin everything?
It makes it complicated. It makes it more complicated and more nuanced. So that's been the rub. It's deep diving into the nitty gritty details and seeing how it scales across your system and across your patterns, and trying to consider how it works with all your customer use cases, especially when you don't know what all of them are. You're always surprised when something comes up in your support channels and you're like, oh, that's really fascinating. Let's dig into it. So, like, I didn't think you were going to use it like that. Tell me more.
Yeah. So, I mean, how does design systems work at Amazon? I have some picture of this because, talked to Avery a couple of times over on the fashion side of things. You obviously, but I don't think I have a complete picture of how it's thought about more strategically across the organization. So, like, Amazon has lots of these. And how do they sort of like work together? How does Amazon think about them?
Yeah, Amazon's fascinating in that way, where we're very much in the startup mentality, day one mindset all the time. So there's a lot of teams are thinking about it. How do we optimize? How do we work on these things? And frankly, like, where I sit in the world, it's like I'm just focusing on problems. I'm not getting involved too much in the bigger picture side of things. I do a lot of support from a like, hey, welcome to Amazon. Here's what design systems mean here from a strategic level, and how it improves your workflows and your day-to-day and collaboration with your teammates. But at the end of the day, like, every group and every team here, they have their own agency, and I'm not going to go in and tell them how to do their thing. And we collaborate. There's a lot of discussions around between design system teams. We take a look at what each other is doing, keeping track of it. We sometimes recommend different design systems to the other groups. But yeah, it's kind of like fairly free form, and it's like a mini world inside of itself in many ways. I'm just surprised that there's so many, but also when you think about the scale of the company, it's you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. So,
I mean, Amazon's basically like a modern conglomerate. And so, like, with that many different, like, I know, right? You didn't say it, I did. Like, with that many different lines of business, like, I can imagine that having some sort of single unified system is just like not practical.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, shopping's a very different experience than operations, and that's all very different than console type of experiences that you would experience in an AWS world. And then when you look at different shopping experiences, whether it's like Woot or Zappos or .com or even the mobile world, you're not going to get a one size fits all type of system, and not everybody's going to be satisfied with what one system does versus another. So a lot of times we try to pump the brakes on, like, hey, don't go off and start building a design system for yourself. Like, have you looked around corners to make sure that there's not a system out there that could meet your needs that you could build on top of. So there's a lot of coaching around frugality. Like, you don't need to spend $1 million a year on overhead to get what you need. Like, it could already be there. So yeah, there's quite a lot of coaching that goes involved that's involved there, and you're just trying to make sure that everybody has the right amount of information to make the best decision around where they want to invest their time and energy.
I like that, and I particularly love the fact that I feel like a lot of design system practitioners kind of have this ideal or idealistic views on design system, where like one design system should like encompass everything at your organization and stuff like that. But I agree with you that at some point you need to be pragmatic about it and say, hey, does that actually help us, and how are we going to be able to handle that amount of complexity and stuff like that. So this is something that actually, like seen in a couple of places. And I always like try to give a word of caution about like, hey, like I understand, like this, again, design system practitioner, I feel I have like a tendency to like love abstractions and systems and concepts and stuff like that, obviously. But to a certain point where you're like, actually, do we really need something like that? And also like it's just a scope creep, right? It's like, I heard before, like I'm not gonna say a name, but like a VP of design saying, hey, the design system should like encompass even like if we wanted to create a mug, like it should like give you like basically like like the specification of that thing. And I'm like, should it though? Because like we already have a lot on our hands right now. And so I love
what matters.
I think Brad Frost said, like for him, like design system is like scope to UI, user interface, and that's it. I think it's a reasonable goal for most of us. And then, after that, you do you, right? It's like you can like include whatever you want. But yeah, I get the fact that especially as a large company like Amazon, you might want to have different design systems. And it's not a one solution fits all kind of vibe.
I mean, we're sort of trained that like fragmentation is the effing enemy, right? Like ferret it out everywhere you can and kill it with fire. And I think that there is this idea that strategically fragmenting things makes a lot of sense as long as it's intentional. Like the system is there to basically say like all this unintentional fragmentation that has just kind of existed as a byproduct of the product creation process. Like, yeah, that should all go away. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't say like, here's a good break point in both the scope and use of a system.
Yeah, and in many ways, it's like you can control what you can control, and then there's a lot of things out of your hands, right? Like, and from our perspective, it's not something that I'm going to lose sleep over, right? I have no agency over some of my customer teams and how they're going to implement something, and I could coach them on it, but at the end of the day, they know their customers better than I do, and I'm going to let them make the best decision for their their timelines, their workflows, their customers, and what whatever they need to do. And in many ways, like we try to tell our customer, our design system customers, like we're not going to give you everything. Like we don't expect to give you everything. There's going to be inevitably you need to have a bespoke component or pattern for your needs that are like that's going to make the difference for your workflow or whatever you're trying to accomplish. And it's not something that can be ideated by a system team ahead of time and be like, oh yeah, we totally have that thing accounted for. The other side of it too is like how much every time you launch a new feature, a new component, or a new service that's like tangential to the system, you have to continue supporting it. So like at what point is too much, right? Like that's where scale like really starts to bog you down when you have not only do you have your components, your patterns, you're constantly doing updates there, you're doing your upgrades to React or version whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have breaking changes, all those things add up, and every time you add something net new, you got to continue supporting it. So whether it's a new pattern or maybe it's a build tool or something upstream like a toolkit, like an annotation toolkit or something like that. Those are things that you'll just, it's all added to your, we call it KTLO or keep the lights on here. All that stuff is overhead. So how do you balance the overhead with the day-to-day, ideation from your customers? So like, hey, like we have this new pattern or we're trying to implement this thing. And it's like, yeah, hey, you can use these things out of the box, or like if you're going to do a custom, maybe here's a couple tips on how you do a custom.
Totally. Like it is fascinating, the idea that like, so many organizations treat buying a design system like buying a tool.
Yeah.
And, we've talked like a lot as a community about design systems are a product. Like anybody that's ever seen Brad or Mina Markham present has heard like you build a roadmap, you have a product, but it's actually like a platform almost more than it is just a product, right? Like it's almost a line of business inside of the organizations that are doing it right, where there is like a KLTO or a platform team that is associated with that work. And it's fascinating to me. Like, and this is like honestly why we started a company that does this, right? Is SaaS does a great job at helping reduce overhead costs inside of platforms. And I think that we were somewhat surprised when we started the company that so many people thought about this as like, oh, it's just another tool or just another piece of software. The reality of a design system is it's much more deeply strategically ingrained in the way we build. And it does kind of require that platform level commitment to it.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about it years ago where, the design, we were talking about design systems and where they fit into companies and, what's their value. And part of that wasn't so much about the components and the velocity or all the goodness that comes with it. It's the people, right? Design systems are like 30% code and pixels and 70% conversations and naming things and interacting with each other or supporting each other. So yeah, I totally agree with that. But it's also, what I've seen is that like design systems are very much the kind of central node where teams are coming and going from, whether it's been here at like a tremendous scale or even, at Pega and previous lives, we were doing design systems before we even called them design systems. We had a single page, shout out to Mike Mai, Chinese gangster, if you're listening.
Love that guy.
We
be on the show.
He should be on the show. He's doing great things in accessibility. Definitely have him on. We were working together many years ago, and he's like, "Hey, I put together all of our components onto a single page, so you can see like the different sizes of buttons and all the textiles, and here are all of our inputs." I'm like, "This is brilliant!" And then from there, we ended up like, "Hey, I'm going to use," you're just whiteboarding and just labeling stuff, and all of a sudden, like the thing's built because like everything was encapsulated, and this was 2013, 2014, I think, right before. I don't know what decade are we in at this point, but it was a while ago. Like this is before I even knew who Brad Frost was or what. We weren't calling them design systems. They were. This is forever ago.
We barely knew how to say.
Yeah.
We barely knew how to spell components.
Right? Yeah.
No,
I think I was doing things in Omnigraphel. Like I was using Omnigraphel for half my work. It was crazy. But like really what happened was it was like our centralized talking point where we were like referencing a static page, not a static page, like a static site where we had all of our pieces and bits and bobs in there. And like, we're like, all right, and you can almost print it out, like literally print it out on paper. Remember that stuff? And you could cut it out and make a website out of it. Like we did many of paper prototypes back then too. But
I mean, remember the days magic of, like, was Pattern Lab and Drupal and like even Storybook basically was a static site generator when it first started.
Yeah. Pattern. I mean, we did all of Bolt in Pattern Lab. It was great. I mean, I think we ended up writing a lot of the Drupal parts of it in Twig and all that business, which is way over my head, but. Yeah, we were all kind of like faking it and failing forward and like, oh, this is better is like, and now like the maturity of what's available because of tools like Knapsack and, things like that are just like, it's the fire hose now. Like we're sort of kind of like out of that incubation stage of value, right? Like we're like all kind of like talking about value, but not really able to prove it. And now I think there's a lot of buy-in from leadership at different size companies that are like, this makes a lot of sense. They've been seeing it for a while, and now it's just more of it's kind of the cost of business, but there's still that understanding of like, how do we optimize this? What does it truly mean to the organization? And I think there's a lot of growth there from a lot of potential on how teams collaborate, product, program, designers, engineers. Like how do we collaborate better? And when I'm thinking about design systems, yes, we have our like core components and our patterns, but like what are the upstream tools, downstream tools? How are all these things coming together so that people could just make really cool stuff in an efficient way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're still probably we're failing forward in different ways. I think we've got a lot of like the technology and the design kind of figured out, but there's a lot of business cases that still are just fundamentally not present. But anyway, I mean, our next guest probably has opinions on this, and we finally have overcome some technical hurdles. Bhargavi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Hello. I think you're muted, Bhargavi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So we're on.
Thank you for being patient with my tech issues, and I don't know how long this is going to last, but I really appreciate you guys having me and being extremely patient with my tech stuff.
Yeah, we're on like plan C or D now for technology and getting you into this live stream.
Tell me to get better of us.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself real quick to the group?
Sorry, Christoph. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Okay. Thank you for your patience and having me here.
I don't think she can hear us.
I don't think she can hear us either.
Oh yeah, and now she's gone.
Well, it didn't last that long. We'll have Bhargavi back for another.
Yeah, it reminds me of a time where I did a live stream with I don't know if you know Kelly Delumeau-Prigent, but he was literally on his mobile phone in his car driving. Like he was late for the beginning of the live stream, so he joined while he was driving. That was wild, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, I hope she'll be back soon.
Yeah, we had a design system podcast episode from a parking garage one time, which was
nice. that's how you know that design system is still like a pioneer world where we just like make it happen. While we wait for Bhargavi to come back, Adam, I had a question for you, and maybe obviously Chris, I'm sure you have opinions on this too, but she might be back. Let me try to add her back. Bhargavi, can you hear us? Can you hear us? We can see you, but I'm not sure you can hear us.
I'm here and I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay! I think we finally beat tech or Wi-Fi mostly. But thank you so much for being patient and having me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So take two. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Bhargavi. It's pronounced like it sounds. Bar as in a place you go to get a drink. Gov, shorter form of government, and the letter E. Bhargavi. I had the design and research teams at Earnest. I've been in the fintech space, so it's nice to see that Knapsack is going to be at the FinTech Design Summit in New York. Hopefully I'll catch you guys there. But yeah, I've been building and scaling design teams, with which comes building and scaling design systems, often making the case for a design system and then getting people to rally behind that idea and then building that out so designers can do more than recreate buttons every time they have to create experiences.
So we were talking about the idea of scale and strategy and design systems. How does Earnest really think about the value of a design system in that product creation process?
Yeah, I think overall there is a huge ask for a design system. There is a need for it. People understand the value that it provides, both at an executive level, but also during the product development process. I think what the challenges we are actually facing right now is more the adoption part, right? When the rubber meets the road problem. So we want a design system, but how do we start adopting it as opposed to continuing building the way that we are used to building? And so Matt, our design engineer, has been doing a lot of work in creating primer sessions. So here's what the design system can do for you. Here's how we can embed it within your kind of area of the product development process. And we'll do half the work for you. We'll build another quarter together, and then you just have to take it over the finish line. And that is sort of like how we've been approaching it. We are here as a resource to help you move this process from how you're used to building it to how we want you to build it using the design system. This is overall going to improve your process and make things a lot easier. But again, our problem is more on the adoption side of things, as opposed to, so scaling is still a ways away for us.
Thanks for that. Actually, that makes me think of something, because I mean, you mentioned adoption, which I think is a great metric, like for a design system. Personally, I believe that, the things that you should really like pay attention to is satisfaction of your users, adoption, and coverage. I think is the, like for me, like the 3 North Star metrics that you should pay attention to. But here's maybe like a spicy take on things. But I was the other day thinking about maybe writing my opinion on the fact that I don't think that most teams and most people need ROI on their design system. And by that, I mean like, like trying to get like a dollar number behind like how much, like your design system is saving you or something like that. And for example, the thing that I was thinking about is that, is anybody asking like, what is the ROI of Agile? And for me, it's like, you need it. And what else can you do exactly? It's like, if you don't want to use a design system because you don't believe in it, then what? Like, what is the other methodology? And so I don't know. I would love to hear, like, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? I don't think we wouldn't be in a world where we have bootstrap UI components if there wasn't a need for a design system and for efficiency, right? So I think that the fact that we have bootstrap component libraries means that there is inherently a need for it. So I'm not entirely sure if ROI is something that people really care about. At least at Earnest, when I've had these conversations around, hey, we need a design system for efficiency purposes or for like more consistency or like, brand consistency and things like that, that has actually had enough of an impact for people to buy into a design system, as opposed to thinking about what is the value of this investment, right? Because I think there is awareness. People understand the efficiency and the improvements that it brings to product development process, and that in itself is enough of a return on their investment.
There's a huge amount of controversy around this right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like a tremendous amount. Dan Mall was on the podcast a couple of months ago, and he said adoption is a vanity metric, like flat out. And I mean, Dan always has spicy takes, and I don't mind necessarily like giving him a shout out here, because he'll probably listen to this later and then like, hopefully blow me up on LinkedIn or something. And then I was talking to a customer of ours yesterday, again for the podcast, and without outing them, they were saying that they literally measure everything, because for them, getting the first sort of like tranche of money to fund the design system was relatively easy. But how do they get the second and the third and the fourth and continue to create a sustainable way of funding the overall platform and program? And I think that like the story is different based on the different levels, right? Like there's an engagement at that executive level where like ROI is probably the only thing that matters to the CFO or to the CTO of the company. But down at the level of like working, I mean, is this agile? Is this something that requires a manifesto and something that writes about this as a way of working? Or is this still a program and a tool? And all of these questions are just like percolating around this community like crazy right now. Like, okay, so is this like agile? Is this a product? Is this a program? Is this about generating ROI and efficiency, especially in an environment where like design budgets and engineering budgets are super constrained right now? That's a big topic. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like what, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Oh, no. You have the mic. Go for it.
It's kind of like what Adam was saying. People are not really asking, why are we investing in GitHub, or why are we buying this tool, right? That it depends on the design maturity of each of the organization. I feel like that is directly tied to what the conversations are around whether it's worth making that investment, right? If you're looking at a smaller startup, there's probably less of conversation around whether we should be investing in a design system. And then at Amazon and companies at that scale, there's just no way they can move without having a design system, right? And in fact, you guys, Adam said that multiple design systems is kind of like what you need, because you don't need like a single design system. So I think the conversation does change depending on the size of the company, but also the design maturity of the company. Adam.
Yeah, and I'll add that it's like kind of always changing as well, right? I don't think there's ever going to be a single metric that is defining your success or opportunity forever, right? So it may be adoption early on to make sure that people are onboarding, but then see customer satisfaction is a massive one. That maybe that's the one, but like, how do you what's the return on customer satisfaction? And it's hidden, right? You may have lower retention, but how do you measure the impact of higher retention? Yeah, but how do you measure the impact of a design system on better retention or like better design, right? But what I found over the years is really it depends on who you're working with and what their inputs are. So if back at Pegasystems, our primary funding partner was in marketing, and I was seated in. I mean, it is what it is, right? Like we're all in different ecosystems, and every team, every group, every company is dealing with whatever they've built, beforehand, or however they're like laying the foundation. And in a lot of ways, it's our job to navigate these enterprises and companies to understand what is going to get people engaged, involved, invested, and that may just be an ROI number. I think for a while it was like speed, velocity gains, and how is that impacting our teams and time to market. And then there's other conversations around like, hey, I don't actually think you're saving me any headcount. I'm actually taking the same amount of time to do the work, but the work is better because I'm not worried about corner radius or spacing or what version of blue this is. It's like I'm actually in the weeds solving the problem, and that solution is that much better because I'm not toiling, I'm delivering and problem solving. So yeah, but so it really depends, right? Like it's going, but that metric could be dollar saved. It could be like consistency, or it could, so like it really depends on what's important to the business at the time.
No, I think that was kind of Dan's point in his comment, was like, there's a lot of different things that can lead up to adoption. Adoption is not the be all end all. And I think a part of it is this idea that if we really believe that design systems are a way of working, kind of similar to your comment, Bhargavi, earlier, like nobody questions the ROI of a Git provider like GitLab or GitHub or something like that. They also don't really think about like what's the adoption percentage of those things inside of my organization, because they're just sort of there. And so we're in this weird middle ground where we still care about things like adoption because we know these systems are new and they're requiring effort to get into the hands of engineers and designers. But we want to be like GitHub and GitLab, where we just think about this as like, this is infrastructure for the way we work. And so we are in this weird middle space where we have this foot in the camp of like, oh yeah, adoption matters, but also we don't really want to care about adoption or ROI because it should just be the way of working. And there is like a disconnect there, right? There's some dissonance in that statement.
Yeah. I'm sure for me, like one of the main reasons why is because like design system is still an emerging methodology or tool or product, whatever you want to call it. And
yeah,
so for now,
forward, right, Adam?
Yeah, we're still not established in a way that was kind of my point, right? It's like, what else are you going to do exactly if you don't believe that you need a design system, right? But at the same time, and I've seen it before, like I think now that there's enough actually resources online that, like if you're looking for how much, like cost effective things are, like bigger companies or, like agencies and stuff like that, like actually created this kind of research so that you can base your, like your judgment on this. I agree with, I can't remember, I think Adam, you mentioned that, like at the beginning, like if you're in a company and you start to create a design system initiative, you probably, like just on the, like just on the theory of the benefits, you get like a 6 months or a 1 year, like kind of like grace period where like, yeah, like try your thing. So I want to clarify that I believe that you need to report back progress that you're making, but at the same time, I don't believe in really like making a, like putting a dollar sign behind, like the methodology of design system. Like it's like, well, it's kind of like a platform thing. Like, it's like you need it. And so, I mean, that's my opinion. But
I'd be really curious to hear everybody's idea of like what the future state of this looks like, right? In your ideal world, if you could paint a picture of what design systems and design system adoption looks like in 5 years, what does living in the future look like for you, right? Like give me some Jetsons level shit here. Like what do we want out of this entire industry? And I'm really curious because we had two people that run like pretty significant design systems at pretty significant companies in very different industries. I'd love to hear like what the difference in that is.
Bhargavi, do you want to go?
You can go, Adam. Why don't you go first?
Okay, no problem. So this is my own personal, I'm not speaking for anybody, but this may upset a lot of people, but I actually, maybe not 5 years, and we'll see how long it takes, but it's almost the democratization of design in many ways, because at what point do you even need to have, there's going to be a point where most UX designers from the design side are not, if you're thinking about that part of the product development process, designers aren't going to be spending as much time in a tool like Figma, right? It's going to be less and less time in a tool like that and more time in it's kind of like the design system story. I'm going to spend less time in this tool, pushing pixels around, and I'm going to start adding my value someplace else and solving a problem. So as UX designers move away from UI design and making pretty pictures and pretty layouts, they're going to be spending more time in like doing research or working with their researchers or spending time with their customers and understanding what the values are there. And in my perfect world, there'd be very little Figma usage. Sorry, y'all, I love the tool. But like it'd be the UI, there'd be a UI designer working on actual UI tools, and then UX designers would be out there like making blueprints and service maps and, doing research that way. And inevitably the technology is going to catch up where, you're going to punch in a bunch of stuff and, you're going to write a prompt and the UI is going to pull from a pattern that you've already designed. In many ways, design systems are the Mechanical Turk of AI in UI development, right? Like there's a team typically that's out there behind the scenes, like designing these things and writing the documentation and putting it all together. And, somebody goes to a documentation site and they're like, oh, I'm going to pull the form pattern and copy and paste, and the code is now just being plumbed, right? That toiling is going to get smaller and smaller. So we're going to be solving bigger and bigger problems, which is kind of the beauty of what we've been doing for the last 10 to 20 years anyways. We've been standing on each other's shoulders as we've been like, hey, I solved this problem. Like tokens, like holy smokes, tokens. Remember when those things hit? And like we're still talking about them and we're still in the weeds on them years later. And it's great because we're just doing cooler and cooler things.
Yeah, and I mean Figma got designers to care about them, which is great.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the words you use. I think the idea of like less toil. I mean, I don't know. I maybe would go like Deus Ex Machina instead of Mechanical Turk, but that might be a little too far flung.
I absolutely agree with Adam. To me, tactically, what that looks like is it's table stakes. Like design systems, knapsack, whatever tool it is that you use is going to be like Figma and user testing or whatever other tools that the design team uses. The design system kind of like comes with that package. It's table stakes tool that everyone uses, and that is sort of like how engineers and designers work together. And that to me means, and again, with what Adam said, and Brad Frost says this quite often these days as well, is this is what AI is meant to be doing, right? We are not reinventing the wheel with what success color should be, what error messages should look like, or what input field active states look like. All of that has been tested. We know what needs to be done there. So this is where AI can shine, which means my designers are spending time thinking about strategic initiatives, or being involved, getting that seat at the table that designers have been talking about and we've been working so hard for, right? Being real strategic partners for product and engineering, as opposed to sitting behind their computer and trying to make sure that they get that 8-pixel rounded corner exactly right across all buttons.
Yeah. And quite frankly, like at this point, not most, but a fair portion of our time is in support. We have customers throughout the entire company all over the world. And, a lot of our conversations focus around what our office hours and our support channels are chatting about. And, we're pulling the threads on those edge cases and making sure not only what we're providing meets the bar, but also like those are the seeds of like what's coming next. So like we're getting, you start talking about like table patterns and things like that, and we've done that work, and throughout the last year you start getting feedback, and it's like, all right, maybe it's time to come back around and enhance this, or like maybe we do need a new component, or maybe this thing isn't working and we can retire it, right? Like, and so it's kind of like we're doing that, a lot of that. Design system teams are kind of the glue in that kind of in-between space of design thinking from a UI and pattern perspective, and really like, how do we get stickier? How do we add more value? How do we reduce roadblocks or provide the grease and the cogs for product design and development?
That's an interesting take. Christoph, you got to do this too, man. You now lead a design system, right? Like I'm just the guy that sells software now on this field guide. So what's your vision?
Yeah, and by the way, this is like the 4th design system that I lead now, so I feel like, but yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I feel like personally, I think that the future, like in 5 years, I'm hoping that like design system as a methodology, and like would be like ingrained enough that, first of all, one of the things that I want kind of like out of the picture is misguiding design system, or like misinterpreting design system as a component library, because it's just like the main output, but that's not the point of it. And so for me, it's all about like, from my point of view, like my role is really to try to make engineering, design, and product work efficiently together. And especially in like, like a great example of this is that, okay, so now that everybody's talking about AI, and now that, like we're trying to all figure out in our own companies and product and stuff like that, what does it mean for us? And what is the best UI to actually attach to that technology? Because in the end, it's like, as a designer, like a technology is not as good as what are you using it for? And this is why, like, I don't know, like, I feel like 5 years ago, I was already like talking with people around like machine learning, like engineers that were like very good at like understanding how this thing works. But there was not really a use case. Like ChatGPT just launched, and like everybody was like, oh, this is cool. Like we can actually do something with it. And so now we're all trying to see how to integrate that in design system. What does it mean exactly? Do we need new UI components? Maybe, maybe not. And that also comes with like, because I feel like most design system practitioners were just, like trying to catch up and like having this, like coverage of all the main, like component library stuff. Okay, cool. but I don't think the real problem is there. So in the future, I hope that design system is seen as a practice like agile, for example, where basically it's ingrained of the life cycle of your company. And that means that there are some people that are there to think about horizontally, because most companies now have like pods of like smaller teams that are just trying to solve for one particular problem. And I've seen it in different companies where that's great, but nobody's really looking across the board. And so I think like this is where design system people shine. And I think this is where I feel like the organization probably needs to evolve, so that we have some kind of horizontal, like call it platform or whatever you want, but having like those people actually trying to think and design in the real sense of design, is that how do we actually put stuff in place so that our production team, and design and product work efficiently together, are able to explore like new possibilities. How do we ingrain that into like the system, so that like then we can build more feature more efficiently all together? Like how is R&D play out in on those things? Like this is, I think, where we need to be and where we need to go. So yeah, that's my future personally.
Oh, that's really interesting. It all solves the things that I really care about. Like, I don't really like having the conversation about is my design system a component library? Is it a set of Figma files? Is it all this other stuff like that? I think that solidifying in the future, I would love to see a solidified concept of like what a design system is that is generally agreed upon, that represents a more encompassing idea of it's not just code, it's not just design, it's also not just a way of working. There's sort of all those things put together. And the stated goal of Knapsack is to change the way people think about building digital products. And we want to do that with systems. And so taking a systems-based approach that, to Adam's point, democratizes the ability to build with code, that's a really powerful thing. And I think that that's where this is all headed. And kind of to Bhargavi's point, the idea that anybody in the organization should be able to sit down and build something with the design system that has value. That's what I would love to see in the future. And I don't know if that looks like Figma. It probably doesn't. I'm not even sure it totally looks like Knapsack, because I don't think that like the UI patterns for this are totally established right now. But that's the direction that I want to see it head, is this idea that we have a system that is curated and centrally managed, that anybody can contribute to and leave it better than they found it. And then also anybody, designer, engineer, whatever, can use that system to build something that has user value, because designers are really good at solving problems and engineers are really good at understanding the constraints and limitations of how you solve those problems in a medium. And if we can marry that together, that's almost like a new discipline that is out there that is saying like, I can build whatever I need to build for this company because I understand how to solve problems, and I can work within the constraints of my system, probably in an AI augmented workflow that lets me build really incredible experiences for users really, really easily. There's my Jetsons.
I think one quick note that I'll probably add there is, I think the role of a platform like Knapsack in that world could be, what does responsible democratization look like, right? Similar to kind of like how research has gone through this like centralized to democratized to now thinking about what are the guardrails we need to set in place. Because once we open the floodgates for everyone to do what they can do, I think the role that will definitely be needed is, what are those guardrails? Can we define it and have people responsibly use these tools that is going to let them build pretty much anything they want?
No, and it's interesting, right? Because we borrowed really heavily from the Git providers, which is funny you brought that up, right? Because we kind of think of ourselves as like the GitHub of design systems. Like we provide the workflow and the infrastructure, you provide the content. And that idea of how do we think about how we manage and control the change and the contribution to the system, that hasn't yet extended into like a responsibility of how you build with it, because not that many people are building that way yet. But as people start to look at that as the future, I think that there definitely like there needs to be a way to manage that responsibly. That was cool. Thanks, y'all. That was a really interesting set of perspectives.
Yeah, I see that we're almost at a time, but is anybody wanted to talk about something, or like something maybe we didn't cover, or a question that you have for somebody in the group?
What?
I have a question.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Adam. This question is
No.
for you.
Yeah.
How do you manage like multiple design systems? Is there like a master design system for all the one design system to rule them all?
Oh, if I had the answer for that, I'd be a rich man. Or not, because I don't know if there's a whole lot of money in this, but for me, I've heard of other groups doing it really well. I believe like Meta has a core design system that the other design systems are scaffolded on top of. And you look at things like Material out of Google, where they have their externalized version of it. They have an internalized enterprise team that's going around supporting the internal application builds and work. So I think it really depends on the ecosystem you're working in, and like for Amazon, like we're still figuring it out and moving forward, and we're still deep in our day-to-day business, and we haven't got to that tipping point where we need to or have to or should consolidate. So we haven't done that. We looking around, we have a lot of great conversations. We had our first design system conference internally this summer, which was interesting. But
I want to hear about that. What did that look like?
I don't think we have enough time to get into it. I didn't participate in it from a like organizational standpoint, but there was a lot of great talks about how it ranged from like, should you even build a design system, which we've kind of like hit at right now, but also like, how do you contribute back? How do you do the managing? How do you make the use case for it? Like, there's still some teams that need to justify the use of a design system in some places. So ours, like, we were kind of looking at the landscape, we kind of did it all. Like, we've seen it in some of the conferences throughout the years where Clarity very much early on was like, this is how you do a design system. And now it's like, this is how I'm using tokens to implement theming and modalities and like different branding and whatever. So like, we're very much kind of like learning how to do it together still, and that is slower than actually doing what we're doing, right? Because our attention there it's not always there. It's with our customers in the day-to-day and whatever we're working on, whatever that initiative is. So I don't have a good answer for it. I'm still digesting a little bit, and there's still some sessions I need to go through, so I can't really expand on it too much.
Oh no, this was
I don't know
helpful.
enough to be. Yeah.
It gives me great solace in the fact that a company the size of Amazon is still figuring things out, because Ernest, again, works in a house of brands, kind of like a situation. We're owned by Navient and we manage those experiences. We also acquired a company called Going Merry. So 3 different brands, and how we use kind of like tokenized systems to retheme, rebrand, very much similar to what you were just like talking about across like the different systems, right? So already feeling better about some of our
approaches. And what I've realized over the years is that we're always going to just be figuring it out, right? We're just going to move on to the next thing that we need to figure out. So looking at what Condé Nast does for theming and Figma, and how they implement their design system, and they have a plugin that swaps one brand to another, and it was like I remember looking at that 2 years ago. I'm like, this is incredible. I'm sure they're on to the next greatest problem that they need to solve, and like, that's what maybe we'll be talking about it on our team. Maybe you'll be talking about it there, but like, inevitably, when you see something at like at Schema, the Schema conference, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. And we start it's that democratization of ideas too, right? So like then it's plants a seed in whatever we're thinking about, and just that'll take off. And who knows, right? Like humans are like complicated plants, and we're going to fill up the cracks and grow there. So we're going to find whatever it is. So whether it is centralized, how do we do centralized design systems really well? Or maybe we need more design systems, right? Like how do we scale the plethora of design systems? And I'm not saying do that, but I'm just trying to be a little devil's advocate of like, it really depends on what your constraints are. And those constraints are going to dictate what problems you're going to solve. So that's me kind of like the non-answer, but like get really excited about like solving the next problem thing. Just keep me going.
Well, hey, thank you all so much for being on. Like it's been great. It's been a great chat. Hopefully there's some seeds sown here so some plants grow. Because I know that like having these conversations in the community is super important because we all are trying to figure out the same set of problems. So thank you both so much.
Yeah. This was so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks for having me in spite of my internet issues.
We'll have to have you back and like in a proper setting, so we can do that later. Thanks both of you to join. Thanks Chris for hosting with me today. We're number 3 is in the bag, but like we're trying to do that monthly, so stay tuned for next month, and I'm sure we'll have a new
I think we're currently targeting September 6th, so it's only 3 weeks away.
Okay, cool. Well, I hope to all see you there. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.